Welcome, everyone. Happy January 2021. Very excited to be here for our first AuthorConnect of the year. Hope you all had great holidays and that you're feeling rested, rejuvenated, and excited to jump in to our first AuthorConnect. I'm Karin Hickson. I'm your host. Very grateful to be here. I work with authors, publishers, agents, speakers bureaus, publicists, marketers, sales reps, and editors, as well as other incredible industry partners here at BookPal, where we believe books have the power to ignite continuous learning, connection, and growth. Today, we will be talking with our guests about their newest book, Courageous Cultures: How to Build Teams of Micro-Innovators, Problem Solvers, and Customer Advocates. Love that title. We'll learn a bit about the book first from our guest authors, and then we'll have time for a Q&A chat at the end, so please do feel free to jump in with questions below. As with every AuthorConnect chat, please do be sure to stay on until the end, as 3 lucky winners will receive a signed copy of Courageous Cultures. A quick reminder just to keep yourself muted today during the presentation. We'll be sure to send out the webinar recording to everyone next week. And again, reminding you to include any questions below in the chat or Q&A section. Our guests today, Karin Hurt and David Dye, help human-centered leaders resolve workplace ambiguity and chaos so that they can drive innovation, productivity, and revenue without burning out employees. So important. As CEO and president of Let's Grow Leaders, they are known for practical tools and leadership development programs that stick. Karin and David are the award-winning authors of 5 books, including the most recent publication, Courageous Cultures: How to Build Teams of Micro-Innovators, Problem Solvers, and Customer Advocates, and Winning Well: A Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul. A former Verizon Wireless executive, Karin was named to Inc. magazine's list of great leadership speakers. David Dye is a former executive and elected official. Karin and David are committed to their philanthropic initiative, Winning Wells, building clean water wells for the people of Cambodia. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed guests, Karin Hurt and David Dye.
Thank you so much for having us. And, you may be curious about how we got so interested in this concept of courageous cultures. You see, we were finding ourselves as we were doing leadership development programs and working across a variety of industries around the world, we were noticing a consistent pattern. We would be working at the very senior levels of organizations, and we would hear things like this.
Why am I the only one that sees these issues? What's wrong with my managers? Why can't they see this stuff and fix it?
We've got so many ways for people to submit their ideas. Why don't more people use them?
My direct reports are always out talking to employees, but all we get is a bunch of fluff.
But what's really interesting? We would go in to do training or focus groups at the front line of these very same organizations, and this is what we would hear.
The only way to get the customer what they need is to use this workaround. I have been doing it for years, which is why my customers love me so much. It's not standard procedure though. So I just keep my head down and hope my boss doesn't notice.
They say they want our ideas, but nothing ever changes. I've stopped bothering.
Whenever a bigwig comes down from HQ to do a focus group, my boss warns us to only talk about the good stuff so it doesn't look like we're complaining.
So employees have ideas, and most leaders really do want to hear them, and somehow there is a disconnect. So we partnered with the University of North Colorado Social Research Lab to get underneath this and to ask the question, when employees were holding back ideas, what kinds of ideas were they holding back? And in organizations where people were reluctant to share ideas, what was going on? And in organizations where people really were seeking out and soliciting and hearing ideas, what were the cultural behaviors that happened?
And so Courageous Cultures is a product of that research. And so let's take a look at some of the key findings that informed all of the strategy and plans that are in Courageous Cultures. The first reason that we discovered that people are not sharing ideas is sometimes they're simply not asked. And their leaders, 49% of respondents said that their leaders just are not consistently asking for ideas. And then, this one came up quite a bit, that feeling that nothing's going to happen. 50% of respondents said that if I were to contribute an idea, it wouldn't be taken seriously by my leadership. And curiously, we also asked, well, what if it's your colleague's idea? And the results were the same. There was no differentiation there. And then 2/3 of folks, if you ever feel stuck, you're not alone. People thinking, my leader operates under the notion we've always done it this way. And so that's the way it's always going to be. And then finally was fear in many different forms. And one of those is 40% of respondents said that they lack the confidence. They don't feel confident to share an idea. There's a number of places that that comes from. So when you think about fear and the different manifestations of it, one of the concepts we like to talk about is something we call FOSU.
So FOSU is fear of speaking up. And we also integrated the work of Dr. Amy Edmondson of Harvard, who wrote the Fearless Organization. She actually wrote the foreword to our book. One of the things that she is very clear about is people are more likely to hold on to a negative experience than a positive experience. And why this is so critical, especially for you as a human-centered leader, is that even if you are leading in an incredibly good way, it is very likely that someone on your team has had a negative experience in the past that has caused them to say, you know what, I tried to speak up once, it didn't work, I'm never doing that again. So you need to overcome that friction and be very deliberate in asking people for their ideas.
And then in addition to overweighting those past negative experiences, there's another psychological tendency that the people in your organizations have, and that is to discount the future. Specifically, we underestimate the benefit that can come from sharing an idea. And so these two factors contribute to that lack of confidence or that fear that people have, regardless of the type of leader that you or your leaders might be. These are the psychological facts that people are walking in the door with. So Courageous Cultures is a roadmap to building a culture where people like us raise our hand on behalf of the customer to solve problems, to create those micro innovations. That's what we wrote Courageous Cultures to do. And here is a quick overview of the process that is involved in doing that.
Yeah, so we are going to just share briefly a couple of these first steps here. We're not going to take you through the entire process, but we'll talk about the importance of navigating the narrative, creating clarity, cultivating curiosity, and responding with regard. Now, before we go there, you may be wondering, well, what kinds of ideas or people not bringing up? And so in our research, when we said, if you had an idea that you didn't share, what would that idea have accomplished? And it was interesting. They said, I have an idea to improve the customer experience, to improve the employee experience, or to improve productivity in a process. So these ideas that are being withheld are not trivial. So let's start just very briefly with this first concept, which is navigating the narrative. And this is all about, as a leader, what is your relationship with speaking up? Are you willing to speak up? What has your experience been in the past? And how do you get past your own fear? Because the truth is, with all of this, leaders go first. So let me share with you just a brief example. So we were working with a very senior team. They had brought us in. So who was there in the room? We're 20 people. It was the heads of the 5 different brands of this organization and the people who were in succession to move into those roles. And we had a very strategic initiative that we were bringing these minds together to really think about, have candid conversations, and to build a strategic plan. Now, do you ever get a sense when you're in the room that people are just not talking about something that really needs to be said? Well, I had that feeling. And so what I did is I went to my purse and I pulled out a stack of index cards and I gave them to everyone in the room. And I said, on the front of the card, please put an H and write your biggest hopes for this project. And then on the back, please write an F and write your biggest fear for the project. I collected the cards and then I read them out anonymously. Now, the hopes were all the things that we have been talking about. They were the things that were spread on the easel sheets all over the room. That's why we were there. Everyone was strategically aligned. What was fascinating was the fears. I do not trust that my peers are going to do what they're saying they're going to do. I think I'm the only one who's really committed to this. I'm not sure we really have buy-in and people are going to go back and execute. Every fear was the same. That's what we call a fear forage. The ability to get underneath the tough conversations that people are unwilling to have. Imagine if we did not have that information, what would have happened? We would have spent 2 days working on a strategic plan that would not have been executed. But instead, we were able to say, okay, here's what's going on, making the invisible visible and have the conversation.
And so it starts with navigating your narrative, tapping into your own stories, speaking up yourself, and getting those things in the room for your team. From there, you want to create clarity. And when we're talking about create clarity, it's simply the act of establishing a mutual understanding about what matters most, about the fact that you really do want ideas, and where you most need a great idea. Many leaders lack clarity around that, and so they're getting ideas all over the place, but not the ones they most need. So let's start with that kind of clarity. And then from there, we move into the crux of the book, which is cultivating curiosity. Because one of the challenges that we encountered as we were having these conversations with leaders around the world in different industries was, I've got an open door. People know that I'm open. And the problem with an open door is that it's passive. And if you recall the research, almost half of folks said, my leaders aren't asking for ideas, so they don't want them. An open door isn't asking, it takes intentionality. And so what does that intentionality look like? It takes the form of something we call a courageous question.
So a courageous question differs from a, hey, how can we make it better question in 2 ways. 1, it is specific, and 2, it is vulnerable. So let me give you a couple of quick examples. One of our favorite is from Don Yeager, who's a COO at Mural, which is a BPO, says, ask his frontline people who are taking the phone calls, what's one policy of ours that just sucks? Now, we love this because as the COO, Don is going out and saying, you know what, I get it. We probably have some policies that are ticking off our customers. What is it? So that's vulnerable because he's assuming that improvement is possible. And it's specific, which lowers the friction because he's only asking for one. And so people can answer that question quickly. Another example would be, what is the problem we have that no one talks about? Or, what is the greatest obstacle to your productivity right now? So assuming that improvement is possible. And then one other way to do this, and this is a technique that we've been using in our training programs and in our idea inspiration summits. This is our idea model. And so this is teaching your team how to bring you better vetted ideas. So why is this idea interesting? Meaning, why is it strategically aligned with where we were clear that we really needed an idea? D, is it doable? And that is so important right now, right? Because there is so much going on. Things are changing so fast. Is this something we could actually pull off? E, is it engaging? Meaning, who else might think this is a good idea? This is where you're teaching your team to think through strategic stakeholders. And A, what are a couple of key first actions? So getting people to bring you ideas that are strategically aligned, that are doable, that they've thought through who else to include, and are coming to you with recommendations of the first next steps.
So we've navigated the narrative, created clarity, cultivated curiosity. The fourth and final step we want to share with you today is something that we discovered in the process of having a conversation with one of our large financial clients and financial institution. And they had a really robust way for collecting ideas. They were getting hundreds every month. And the executive in charge told us, you know, what's interesting, half of the ideas we get are things we've already implemented. And we said, wow, you must have incredible internal employee satisfaction in that regard. He said, you would think so, but our pulse surveys are not showing that. And we said, so how are you going back to those folks who contributed those ideas and telling them, listen, your idea was so good, it's already being used? He said, oh, we're not. That would probably be a good idea. Well, this gave rise to one of the most important ways to maintain momentum and the flow of positive contributions from your team. We call it respond with regard. We have to respond, but we got to do it in a particular way, regardless of the kind of idea we get. So there are 3 steps to respond with regard. First, gratitude, then information, and finally, invitation. What does this look like? Hey, thank you for thinking about how we can improve, how we can be better. Here's some additional information, and this step changes depending on the quality of the idea. Is it already implemented? Where can they learn more? Here's some additional data that will help you think more strategically or a competing priority. So we're going to start with gratitude. Thank you. Add some information to help them be the best thinker they can be, and then an invitation. Hey, listen, would love to get your thoughts about, and then you share back, create clarity. Where is the idea that you really need in order to advance things strategically? So invite them to be thinking about that. Thank you for that idea. Here's some other information. Love to get your thoughts on where we could go with this, or how we could overcome this challenge or solve this problem. So courageous cultures.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting because when we were doing the research for this book, and as we were writing it, there is no way we could have anticipated that we were going to be launching it right in the heart of the pandemic. But what has been so interesting for us is how these tools and the process that we can take clients through are so useful to help people capture the learning that they're having from this crisis right now, and to think more strategically and to tap into everyone's great ideas for these pivots that everyone's been on. So we've been working with companies. We've done some really neat programs with Amazon and Microsoft and number of healthcare organizations where we've brought people together, said, give us this couple of three strategic areas where you really need a great idea right now, and then help people in smaller groups think through and vet their very best ideas that then they can integrate into their strategic plan. So that's just a little bit of a high-level overview. And then Karin, back over to you.
I love this so much. I just wanted to reiterate to you guys and to everyone listening what a fabulous book and resource Courageous Cultures is, because it's so specific. It gives you such great actionable steps, no matter how large your team or organization or how small. You kind of touched on this just kind of with what you were saying, but how have you seen industries or companies or teams pivot in the time of COVID-19 regarding FOSU, fear of speaking up and reaching people via, Zoom or whatever remote tool they're using. And also just with that idea activation and that idea framework, how have you seen them kind of implement that successfully?
Yeah, I will tell you that one of the most interesting things for us that we have noticed as we're working with organizations through this process is one of the most vital things is vulnerability of a leader and getting past their own fear. So for example, we were working with one really senior leader at a tech company, and he was having us work with him on a global conference. So he had people across a variety of countries. So of course, all different cultures, right? And all different norms of the cultures. And he started by saying, here, we're going to be working with Karin and David on some really, important strategic planning work, and we're going to be coming up with great ideas. But before we start, I want to just take a moment and share with you what the last couple of months have been like for me. And then he said, you know what, when this all started, I thought, oh gosh, our poor China teams, everybody's going to have to rally around and help China. And, he's like, I was working really long hours. And then I'm in depth about worrying about China. And now we're talking about Italy and our Italy teams. He said, and I'm still not thinking, oh, this is coming to the United States and impact. I said, so I've been like on this whirlwind trying to figure out how we're going to cope and do this pivot. And at the same time, I have not been home for my, I have not been engaged with my children. I have 2 small children. My partner, has been working so hard and picking up all the slack at home. I feel guilty. I'm tired. And he's like, and I don't share that for you to be sorry for me. I share that because I know that these kinds of things are happening in every one of your homes. I know you're tired. I know you're stressed. I know you're worried. And I know some of your stories. I know we've had people who've died. I know all this. So please know that anything we do strategically from here on out in the next couple of days is all based in that context. I mean, you could have heard a virtual pin drop, right? So now, now people are like, okay, he gets it, and it opens people's hearts and minds and makes it safer for people to share their own concerns about why an idea might just not work, but also to take more risks in bringing forward their ideas.
And starting with that premise of navigating the narrative, one of the best examples we've seen of that in practice, they then went and dove very deep from a courageous culture's perspective on really foundational business challenges they were facing, and were able to quickly generate ideas to start addressing those.
The other thing that I would say is that I think that this is so useful right now because people couldn't keep doing things the way they've always done them. So, there's a lot of change management theory that says when things are unfrozen, that's the best time to get creative. And I think because people, are now having to question assumptions. I mean, we worked with one contact center where they said, I know, because we worked for them for a while. Their first premise was we would never have our agents working from home, right? That's not something we would do. Within 1 week, they had to figure out how they were going to have their agents working from home. And once they think creatively about that, what else could they be doing differently?
There's no handbook out there, how to respond to a pandemic, right? The business practicum for it just doesn't exist. And for every organization that we've worked with and all the others that we've read about, every idea is needed in order to, and so how do you get those? How do you overcome the reluctance that, gosh, what's in change, people also can shut down. And so how to, work against that and build that culture so that you're getting every brain thinking about what to do and how things can be better.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true that it really needs to come from the top down in terms of what you want people to do, and showing that vulnerability, I think, is just the first way to kind of build that psychological safety back up for everybody, and who doesn't really know, what should I be doing next, or how should I be pivoting to help the team, and what are our new strategies going forward in this new way of life and business that no one could have seen. So in some ways, I'm sure it was challenging launching this book during a pandemic, but I feel like even more, it shows your clients, readers who will find this book for years to come, what a great resource and what a great book that it is that they should be implementing. I wanted to kind of switch into hiring, because I feel like that's also an area some businesses may not be hiring, but I think a lot of different industries might also be looking for, maybe we need to consider new types of people or talent or team members as we pivot. How have you seen companies kind of answer that question in just the hiring? I guess, how do they do the hiring in an effective way to make sure that they're identifying, okay, do we need micro innovators or problem solvers or customer advocates, and like which ones and what mix? Like what have you seen that's worked?
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually wrote a blog article about that, interview questions that you could use to ask, right? Because I think, situational and behavioral interview questions are always the best. Tell me about an idea that you brought forward that really you think helped to change the game, in your last role. Or tell me about the very best idea you brought forward that didn't work. It doesn't matter, because that's part of it, is you want to be sending a message that I want your ideas. And we know that we're not going to be able to implement all of them. But, as David was saying, how do you respond with regard
Yeah, one organization CEO I was talking with, and she actually did this, and full admission, when we were hiring, we stole the idea with her permission, which was, you know, that humorous communication of what it is that you're really looking for up front. And her line, her job posting for a operations type role started with, "Do you enjoy matching other people's socks?" Right?
Wow.
That it's an innovative, it's creative, it's whimsical, but boy, does it filter out really quickly those who do and those who don't. Like, oh no, not at all. And yeah, that turns my crank, right? And I'm all about innovating how we can do sock matching more quickly, more efficiently, right? So, you know, lots of fun ways to do that.
I like that. I guess what's been some of your other interesting findings since launching the book in July, or just responses you've received from, you know, either your clients or online readers about your book?
Well, it's so interesting because the number one word that people have used is practical. Like, this is incredibly practical, that there's been a lot of philosophical conversation of psychological safety. How do you, but this is go ask these strategic questions.
It's a roadmap.
Teach people how to think critically by using the idea model. Ask these four. We have an own the ugly process. What are you underestimating? What's got to go? Where are we losing? Where are we missing? Yes. Use that in your strategic planning. And so people are telling us, you know, what's really cool? Like, I can carve out 2 hours, take a strategic area of the business that I really need it, follow this process, use these tools, and we have a plan. And so I think I would say again and again, people literally, like, they come out of the program and they're like, oh, well, that was really practical, or I have a really better idea now. And so that's good to go. And I think that's so important right now because people don't have a lot of time. They need to be thinking strategically, but they need to do it quickly, and they need to be doing it about ideas that could be implemented right away. I think we're seeing less. Let's think about our 5-year plan. Right? It's more like, let's figure out what we're really going to accomplish in the next 6 months.
Right. Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
I was going to, and I looked at the clock.
I know this time has been quick. Well, one final question, just because I thought it was a high percentage. I know you said in the book, 45% of employees say that they haven't been trained, which I thought was higher than I would have expected. I was thinking maybe 20, 30%. What do you find? I mean, do clients come to you with that problem? And what is your best suggestion for helping organizations and teams kind of combat that training issue?
Yeah, so specifically the number that you're referencing there is trained with regard to critical thinking, problem solving, and contributing ideas and so on. And so the numbers with regard to training overall range. So you've got managers saying 98% of managers in one big survey said they could use more training and how to lead more effectively. And we see that constantly with organizations that we talk with who, here we're entrusting our most important asset, our people, to people who may not have the skills to lead effectively. And so we obviously have a passion for that and help them with that.
Yeah. So I think when you think about it, where does this break down? It's so interesting when people come to us and they say, you know what, my managers don't think critically. The first place we start is, do they understand the strategy, where you're headed? Because most of the time when people the reason they can't think strategically is they don't get the bigger picture. So that's when you're training people in critical thinking, the first thing is, I mean, you don't need to give them proprietary information but if you want them to think strategically about an area of the business, make sure they understand where you're really headed with it. And then you get very specific and say, okay, so because this is where we're headed, what are the here's now, bring me ideas, and then use the idea model and teach them how to vet their ideas towards that strategic area.
Okay. Yep. I love that. Yeah. I love all the idea, the ugly. I wrote all those things down when I was reading your book. I feel like your book is just one of those books where you just really are highlighting or underlining something on each page. So I hope, all of our listeners and anyone who hasn't yet read it, it's such an incredible resource. On that note as well, we have 3 winners today who are going to get a signed copy of Courageous Cultures. So congratulations to Maria R., Tracy B., and Karin H. We will make sure we message you. Oh, I love that. We'll make sure we message you for your best mailing address, and we will be sure to get those out. I just want to again thank both of you so much for your time today. I'm really just thrilled to be in connection with both of you, to learn from you, and for us to continue telling people about courageous cultures, as it is such an incredible resource. For everyone listening today, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar next week, so do stay tuned for that. Our next AuthorConnect chat will be February 3rd at 11 a.m. Pacific with Pamela Fuller. We'll be talking about her book, The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias. And again, thank you both, and hoping that everyone stays safe and healthy and continues to find ways to build courageous cultures.
Well, thank you so very much for having us. And thank you for being such an incredible partner when it comes to, bulk orders, working for conferences, working with big clients, fulfillment. You're just you're always so responsive. So we really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you guys. It's a joy to work with you. All right. Bye, everybody.